Good morning from Pisa, Italy. I am Eugenio Picano of the National Research Council in the Institute of Clinical Physiology in Pisa, and it is for me always an honor, a privilege, and an occasion to learn to attend the meeting of our Stress Echo World Cup winner in the last 20 years from coronary flow velocity reserve to strain, Professor Jorge Levenstein, for us, Diego Armando Lionel Levenstein and his fantastic family. I will discuss Ostraseco A, B, C, D, E, and this is a good occasion also to pay a tribute to the tremendous contribution of Buenos Aires and different laboratories, all with the strong imprinting of Professor Jorge Levenstein that gave an outstanding contribution to the database and understanding of this study now on air and recruiting until 2025 and following up patients until 2030. The change in perspective was from a stenoticocentric view to a patient-oriented view of cardiovascular testing. In the classical perspective that helped us in the last 50 years and served us well, the good cardiologist treats the coronary stenosis, and the focus of imaging is all on coronary artery stenosis and critical coronary artery stenosis, non-obstructive coronary stenosis, coronary calcification, perivascular inflammation that gives some hints on the vulnerability of the plaque, and fractional flow reserve. Now, in the new perspective, we know that the best cardiologist treats the vulnerable patient, and therefore we have to diagnose and image myocardial ischemia, but also pulmonary congestion, systolic function, coronary microvascular function, and autonomic reserve. If these are the new targets, also the tools must evolve and adapt. Of this science, step A is the one endorsed by guidelines, both European and North American. And we know that with different views, we can gain a tomographic panoramic imaging of the site, extent, geography of the ischemic region, in this case the apical and the lateral wall, from 4, 3, 2-chamber parasternal views, and we at the same time have an index of the chronotropic reserve through the increase in heart rate and global contractile function through changes in end systolic volume. However, regional wall motion over the decades has lost prognostic power of a negative test, and also the rate of positivity dramatically fell from 60 to 70% in the 80s to 10 to 15% in the current era of patients studied on therapy and with atypical forms referred for testing. In addition, as we could evaluate assessing the trend over decades of the negative predictive value of regional wall motion, it is now apparent in patients enrolled in the last decade that if you have a negative test by regional wall motion alone, this is not a guarantee of event-free survival, because these patients may have in a significant amount of subjects events despite negative test. This was not the case in previous decades and corresponds to a change in the referral pattern and also the background therapy that these patients receive. So we need something more, because we cannot accept that the patient has a reassurance from a test negative for regional wall motion and still has a relatively high chance of having events. And therefore we go back to the ABCDE stress echo, and after the standard step A of regional wall motion, we add some more addressing other aspects of vulnerability. In the alphabet order, after A there is a B, which stands for B lines. And it was enough to shift of a few centimeters the transducer from the apical four-chamber view to the third intercostal space to have a view on the shape of lung water. The presence of lung ultrasound and the B lines that are vertical hyperechoic reverberations that originate from the pleural line. They can be detected at rest, and they can be absent at rest and increase or appear during stress. In this case, 3 to 4 B lines at rest, more or less 600 milliliters of extravascular lung water, and 8 to 9 B lines during stress, more or less 1.5 liters of extravascular lung water. This is the direct sign of pulmonary congestion, and an old dream for the cardiologist. And the possibility to image B lines during stress was immediately accepted from the community as a turning point in our diagnosis of heart failure and several other conditions. The comment to the paper of Stress Echo 2020 by Maria Chiara Scali on JACC imaging from Professor Sharon Mulvag clearly explained that stress lung ultrasound provides us with an immense opportunity to prognosticate and phenotype our patients with heart failure. Lung ultrasound is making a splash in the incoming tidal wave of heart failure, and as this tide of lung water rises, we are now ready and vigilant with a probe in hand. It was also essential for the diffusion and dissemination of the technique during stress that we could move without loss of information from the time-consuming 28-site scan originally proposed to the much simpler 4-site scan focused on the third intercostal space, and absolutely appropriate for stress testing when we have many things to see and very little time available. The time window of opportunity for B lines is the early recovery phase. Step C stands for left ventricular contractile reserve. There is more in the global function of the left ventricle that is dreamt of in regional motion, and this can be obtained only with a true volumetric estimate of left ventricular and diastolic, which is an index of diastolic function and preload reserve, and systolic, which is a more functional index that is expression of myocardial contractility and can be ideally normalized for systolic blood pressure to obtain force or elastance, which is a relatively load-independent index of contractility. In this case, with the ultrasound enhancing agent, you see that there is a clear reduction in end systolic volume that witnesses that the global systolic function of this ventricle is supernormal or normal. And there are two aspects in the volumetric assessment of stress echo. One is end systolic volume that usually is reduced during stress and is an index of systolic reserve, and end diastolic volume that, at least in the early stages of exercise, increases, and this increase is a marker of a normal preload reserve. Combined with a simple assessment of systolic blood pressure and systolic volume give an estimate of force, which provides a more accurate index than ejection fraction of left ventricular contractility. So it is easy to have access to extremely sophisticated information, but it is necessary to measure volume, something that virtually very few laboratories in the world do for a clinically oriented routine and workflow. But this is now easy, possible with zero-click and 100% reproducibility with one of the many available accurate algorithms that allow an operator independent assessment of 4 chambers volume. This makes the estimate of step C much easier. This was done in StressEco 2020 network with a cooperation with Poland, Lithuanian spin-off on AI and other friends across the world. Then comes D. D stands for Doppler-based coronary flow velocity reserve. And this is another dimension, the estimation of coronary physiology and coronary microcirculation. In this case, you have a negative echo by regional wall motion, but we know that the event rate can still be high in a patient with a negative and falsely reassuring test by wall motion criteria, and the measurement of the left anterior descending pulse Doppler flow velocity gives immediately an estimate of coronary flow velocity reserve, in this case an increase in more than threefold, which is perfectly normal. The event rate of this patient is less than 0.5% per year. The paper was published by, again, StressEco 2030 network on JACC, and there was an enlightening comment by the editor, Professor Valentin Fuster, that of course was extremely well aware of the long history of coronary flow velocity in cardiology, an history that dates back at least 50 years to the pioneering work in the early 70s of Lance Gould, but now we have a test that every cardiology in every lab of the world can perform, knowing that the technology used is quite feasible. I can see a future, Professor Fuster says, in which the use of the quadruple ABCD protocol may provide a lot of information. The possibility of cardiology to go back to the future, back because coronary flow reserve is as old as myself in cardiology, but to the future because now everyone can do it. And the revival or the dissemination of coronary flow velocity reserve was finally accepted also by general cardiology guidelines, both European in 2019 and North American in 2021. And for the first time, stress echocardiography with coronary flow velocity reserve assessment received a 2B class of recommendation for assessing patients with suspected ischemia and non-obstructive CAD. But in the guidelines, it's also explained that this assessment can be very useful also for patients with angiographically assessed coronary artery disease, because this information is independent and additive of a regional wall motion. And then we have a non-imaging parameter, which is the letter E, which stands for EKG-based heart rate reserve. It's simple, the ideal parameter, zero training, 100% reproducibility, and feasible in everyone. Just the ratio between peak and rest stress during exercise, dobutamine, or vasodilator, since adenosine is a direct adrenergic stimulus. And if you have a normal increase in heart rate, you have a normal sympathetic autonomic reserve, and in this way an old scotoma of the technique, which is the lack of possibility to have an insight on electrical instability, is now cured. We can have this in a very simple way with heart rate. And therefore, we go back to a new view of stress echo, and all parameters are conceptually, methodologically, and logistically converging in the stress echo 2.0. We have regional wall motion for focus on ischemic or non-ischemic heart, which is the mirror of epicardial coronary artery, wet or dry lung with B lines which indicate the pulmonary congestion and therefore a proxy of pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, weak or strong heart and therefore the myocardium, the fibrosis or the necrosis of the myocardium, which may not affect regional wall motion but usually affects global function. Cold or warm heart, since the heart is a erectile organ and therefore increasing flow means warmer myocardium, and cold heart means lower increase in flow, which is an index of coronary macrovascular dysfunction. Then heart rate reserve, which is an index of the integrity of sympathetic reserve and therefore neuronal innervation of the sinus node, and the normal heart is a fast heart with a normal increase in heart rate. The abnormal heart is a slow heart with a subnormal increase in heart rate with either vasodilator or exercise or dobutamine stress. And of course it is not in A, B, C, D, E, because in different patients we can exploit other steps of the stress, or if you wish other letters of the alphabet. It is a menu a la carte or a smartphone with different applications, and you can use it in different patients. Step F for regurgitant flow, important in valvular disease. Step G gradient, for instance, in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Step L for left atrial volume and reservoir strain, which is important, for instance, in atrial fibrillation or in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. P for pulmonary hemodynamics with pulmonary artery systolic pressure and DE prime. Step R for right ventricular function, for instance, in patients with repeated tetralogy of Fallot or pulmonary hypertension. To each patient, it's his or her own letter or parameter or step. And in clinical guidelines, this evidence is somewhat scattered in different guidelines, but present. We have in European Society of Cardiology guidelines a recommendation for regional wall motion in patients with chronic coronary syndromes, but also heart transplant, Kawasaki disease, congenital heart disease with ischemic prone conditions, or cancer, post-chest radiotherapy, or athletes. We have obviously a recommendation still on the quest for viability in chronic coronary syndrome and heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, an explicit recommendation for coronary flow velocity reserve in chronic coronary syndromes and in OCA patients, gradients and regurgitation in valvular heart disease, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and some types of congenital heart disease, tricuspid regurgitation and TAPSA in pulmonary hypertension and congenital heart disease, and DE prime for heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. We cannot do all in all patients, but to each patient we can, for each patient we can select the appropriate step to give the most, to squeeze the most from the tremendous versatility of stress. The study on stress echo 2030 is now ongoing, recruiting patients now up over 6,800 up to today from 40 laboratories of 20 countries, and number one from non-Italian countries is the recruitment power of Argentina and the Laboratory of Investigaciones Médicas headed by Professor Löwenstein with Rosina and Diego Jr. and all our friends. And it is important that this is a way to create in a short time evidences currently lacking, because when we spoke of wall motion we had 40 or 50 years of experience behind us. Now we have the new protocol and the experience is relatively lacking, but we are filling the gap in a short time, and the logo of the project is the Leaning Tower of Pisa with the ABCDE protocol, and the study is a flagship project of the Italian Society of Echocardiography, with the strongest imaging national society in Italy, and the motto is from the Pisan Cantos, from a famous American poet. And under white clouds, cielo di Pisa, out of all this beauty, something must come. Thank you, Professor Levenstein. Thank you, colleagues, and Stress Echo 2030 is waiting for you.